Moving on to talking about issues in development. The first issue that I'm going to talk about is something called the nature-nurture issue, sometimes called the nature-nurture debate, or sometimes people will just say nature versus nurture, or nature and nurture. So clearly we got two options, nature or nurture. What do those things have to do with? Nature has to do with things like biology and genetics. All right, it's sort of like what the individual brings to a situation. It includes inherited characteristics that can influence all aspects of development. Now, what would nurture be? Nurture is experience, environment, basically all the things that happen to you that can possibly influence your development. And that includes things like intrauterine environment, prenatal environment, things you eat, things you hear, pollution in the air, conversations you have with people. These are all elements of nurture. A lot of things can be counted as nurture. So why does this come up with studying development? Well, there have been researchers, theorists throughout time who have tried to figure out which is more influential on development, or what is most relevant for a particular developmental characteristic, saying, okay, so does nurture cause this? Does nature cause this? To give you an example of something where someone might be interested in this sort of thing. All right, let's say you are interested in ADHD, all right, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I know many people have probably heard of that diagnosis, probably know some people with that diagnosis, whether you know it or not. All right, so what if maybe you're someone who says, well, where does this come from? Where does ADHD even come from? Is that something that develops from nature? Like maybe you have a genetic cause of ADHD, and then if you've got that genetic potential, you've got that inheritance, then you have ADHD. Or is it a nurture thing? Like maybe the environment leads to the symptoms of ADHD in some way. And then when I teach in-person classes, I'll often open it up and I say, folks, what are your opinions? Do you think this is a nature thing or a nurture thing? And I will often get mixed ideas from students. Students usually, they'll lean in the direction of saying, I think that's nature, because I know of people who have families where there are multiple people with ADHD. And other people will say, well, no, I knew somebody who grew up in a really hectic home, and sometimes I wonder if their ADHD was just because they had this really unstructured upbringing. And which is it? What would research indicate? Well, research actually indicates, just like many things, there's a combination of nature and nurture influences on ADHD. Just about everything we try to study in developmental psychology has some aspect of nature, some aspect of nurture influencing it. The question comes in, the better question is not which one is it? The better question is, well, which one is more influential? There's always some combination of nature and nurture, but some things are more influenced by nature or more influenced by nurture. We should never discount either one of them, though. So when we study nature and nurture, one area of research that has been very helpful, very informative, has been twin studies, research with twins. Now, when I teach developmental psychology as a separate class, I often have a separate sort of lesson where we talk about how twins are formed and what the different types of twins are. So you're going to get the short version. There are two basic types of twins. Now, technically, you have some other fancy distinctions, but we're going to focus on the two most common types of twins: dizygotic and monozygotic. You may be familiar with the terms identical and fraternal twins. All right, so which one is which? Are these the same things? Which one has to do with which one? All right, monozygotic twins. They start off as a single zygote. We haven't talked about that yet, but that's essentially an egg gets fertilized, and the first representation of a new individual is called a zygote. All right. You may have heard that sometimes this fertilized egg, this zygote, it can split into two. We don't know why, but sometimes it does that. All right. Since the same zygote contributes to the genetic material for both of these new individuals, they are nearly 100% similar in their genetic inheritance. There are other fancy terms that I want to use right now, but I'm holding off since this is intro level. So genetically, their genetic inheritance, the stuff that can make them different as individuals, it's almost 100% similar. I'm saying almost because it's not quite, but pretty dang close to 100% similar. What about the other type? What's the other type? Diazygotic twins, they start off as two separate zygotes. Basically, when someone ovulated, I'm hoping you're at least remotely familiar with the term ovulation. When someone produces an ovum, often called an egg, someone produces an ovum, there's often one ovum at a time in a menstrual cycle. Sometimes there's more than one. For a wide variety of reasons, sometimes there's more than one. Some people are just genetically prone to that. Sometimes you might be using fertility drugs to hyperstimulate the ovaries. Sometimes stress can contribute to having multiple ovulation. It just happens. Anytime someone ovulates, there's always a chance that they can ovulate more than one, even though the default is just to have one. So, ovulate more than one ovum, they can both become fertilized. But since they are separate individuals, two separate sperm fertilize two separate ova, so they are not genetically identical, but they are siblings. They are as genetically similar as any siblings. You probably don't know how genetically similar you are to your siblings, your brothers, sisters, or perhaps non-binary siblings. 50%, it's about 50%. They are 50% similar in their genetic inheritance. All right, why do we care about this? Nature-nurture studies. We can compare diazygotic twins to monozygotic twins and see if monozygotic twins are more similar than diazygotic twins on some characteristic. It is suggestive of there being more genetic influence since they are so much more genetically similar. They are genetically identical or nearly genetically identical. They are more similar. That suggests a stronger nature push or influence on whatever characteristic is being studied. All right, so in studies, in twin studies, we come up with this thing called a concordance rate. Concordance rate has to do with similarity, the probability that one twin develops a condition or characteristic if the other twin does. So we compare concordance rates of monozygotic and diazygotic twins to try to tease apart the influence of nature versus nurture in twin studies. All right, now the next thing that I am going to cover, let's see. Oh, I was getting ready to forget. So there's always that risk I'm going to forget a term. We also come up with a special number called a heritability estimate. Heritability estimates estimation of how much variability in a trait is due to genetics. And it is an estimate, it's not perfect, but the stronger the heritability estimate, the more of a push nature has on that particular characteristic. All right, so in the next video, I'm going to talk about continuity and discontinuity. All right, so now we've got nature and nurture down. Then we're going to learn about how when people talk about continuity and discontinuity with studying development.